of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Evening, everyone. Tonight's main agenda is a workshop, but we do have some business to take care of before we move into our workshop setting. By way of announcement, I'd like to repeat that the front cover of the warrant mailed to residents lists the special town meeting as being on Monday, November 28th. The actual date of the meeting is Tuesday, November 28th, which is the date that's on the actual warrant inside the mailing. So the special town meeting is next Tuesday, November 28th, and it is at the middle high school at 7.
Hey, do you think we should have a sign, like out for Monday night, the meeting's Tuesday, because in case some people go on Monday?
Well, they have the flashing sign at the police station now. It's in the papers, we've been announcing it, but, I guess we probably ought to put a sign over there on Monday night.
And say, sorry, come back tomorrow, please.
It's really on what would amount to be the envelope as opposed to the body of the warrant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, we're going to move down into a workshop setting, but first I'd like to know, is there any public comment from the board?
Oh, I just wanted to mention again that prior to the meeting, the marching band is going to play at 6:30 and 6:45. I checked with the town clerk's office, and you can start registering for the meeting at 6:30. So if you watch the 6:30 performance, scoot over and register right after that. And if you want to go to the 6:45 performance, then register first. And it's going to be outside or in the gym, whichever, depending on the weather. And it's just kind of, I think there's 7-minute halftime performance.
Okay, great. Anything else from the board? Any public comment from the public? Please, sir. Right here.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. I'd just like to confirm through the chair to town manager that there is actually a functional sign at the end of the driveway at the public safety building. It was my understanding that the sign that we have in town was out of service as of 24 or 36 hours ago, and they were looking to borrow a sign. The last time I drove by, there was not a sign out there.
I drove by at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. It was working, and the message was about the special town meeting.
Thank you very much. It's been put up since I went past.
Mm-hmm. Any other public comment from the public? Okay. Our first agenda item is the town manager report. This one, you.
The first item on my report is actually an item on the agenda under current business, the announcement of ratification of collective bargaining agreement with the Municipal Employees Union. So the contract was ratified by both the Municipal Employees Bargaining Unit and the town through the Board of Selectmen, and it is for a 3-year agreement from July 1st, 2017 until June 30th, 2020. The main provisions of the agreement are as follows. Wages were a 2% cost of living adjustment for each fiscal year of the agreement. There was the elimination of a previous clause for a 1% signing bonus for years 2 and 3 of the agreement. Longevity was changed from a percentage of annual pay to a flat dollar payment for years of service. There was an inclusion of a new provision regarding a 30-day probationary period for employees that have been promoted to a new position, and in the event the town removes the employee during the promotional process, the employee may return to their prior position. And it also provides clarification and statutory updates to certain articles within the agreement. This now will go before a special town meeting for approval to fund the first year of the contract. The total for year 1 of the contract is $13,746.45, which will come out of the salary reserve line item in the current year's budget that was approved at the annual town meeting. The town facilities walking tour in Charette. The walking tour is scheduled for Saturday, December 2nd at 10 a.m. and the public is invited to join the board to take a tour of the 5 town buildings that have been the focus of our town facilities discussion: the Town Hall, the Ritter Memorial Building, Old Primary School, the Brooks House, and the TC Passios. Participants will be asked to sign a waiver and release of liability form if accessing certain areas, particularly the old primary school. Also, as a disclaimer, not all areas of the building will be handicapped accessible. The first charrette was decided to be on December 7th, and it will be part of a series of charrettes on town facilities. This will be an opportunity to break out in smaller groups to discuss a set of topics and then report to a larger groups with their ideas on that topic. Selectman McQuaid had previously suggested possible topics to ask participants, including which amenities and services they expect from a town hall or within municipal buildings, and a discussion about the role of and the need for park space within the town center. If there are any other topics the board wishes to discuss, please submit them individually to me, and we can review them at our agenda on the December 5th meeting.
And so this is going to be totally focused on town facilities?
Yes. The town hall painting project is now substantially complete. The contractor will return on November 24th to do certain touch-ups to the paint, including the front door and around the fire escape. I want to acknowledge Fox Painting for a phenomenal job their crew did, given the state of this building, their professionalism, and their cleanliness. I also want to acknowledge the DPW director and our facility staff for their assistance in answering questions and working with Fox Painting on ensuring this job went smoothly, given that we needed to keep the building open to the public throughout this project. To reiterate statements made by the DPW director, the paint will last the town 5 to 10 years, but the underlying conditions of the building will need to be addressed next time it gets painted, and that includes replacing all the clapboard and sheathing. Overall, the building looks much better, and the paint will keep the clapboard protected for the meantime, and the contractor replaced a vast amount of rotted clapboard and sheathing in the process. DLTA promoting the local economy grant. MRPC will present their report and recommendations to the board at a meeting in December, which I am recommending we combine with the economic development workshop on December 12th. We will invite all interested stakeholders, advertise on the town website, send emails to the participants of the previous meetings on this topic, and advertise in the paper once the date is confirmed. The plan is to apply for the next round of DLTA funding in December once that is announced, and we will continue this process with meetings with the business community and the public to keep the momentum going. At the last meeting with the businesses, we discussed having the next workshop as an opportunity to invite a representative from the Townsend Chamber of Commerce and others that can provide feedback on what has worked in their community. The next workshop will be held in January. So in discussion on that topic, if we can discuss the December date that meeting will be held. MRPC can come on the 12th. So if we could begin our meeting a little earlier that night and start the workshop on time, the normal time.
Was that the one we got the email about starting at 6?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we can make that, we would start the meeting at 6, do whatever business we have to do first, and then go into the workshop.
That'd be fine with me.
By 6:30 if we can.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's plan to do that, yeah.
Okay, great.
Can I ask one question? You know, when you were talking about the questions for the that Damon had already proposed, could you send those out so we know what questions are already queued up?
Okay, they were the two mentioned in my
Oh,
report.
okay.
Yeah, they're right there.
Oh,
If you have any others, submit them and we'll
Yeah.
talk about them before the meeting, right?
Conservation Commission Habitat Maintenance and Environmental Management Project. As part of a multi-year habitat maintenance and environmental management project, the Conservation Commission used New England Forestry Consultants, Inc. to put together bid specifications for a timber harvesting plan for the small town forest on Mulpus Road. A high bid of $41,429.36 was received and awarded to Blanche Flower Logging. And after paying New England Forestry Consultants their consulting fee for the project management services, the balance of the proceeds will be deposited into the timber revolving account. As a result, you will see timber being removed from this area. The commission is coordinating with the DPW to minimize any interruption in the public use of Mulpus Road. And the point of contact for that project will be Matt Marrow.
And the timber revolving account, what are the kind of expenses that can be, what can that money be used for besides the timber project? Can it be used for maintenance of the land?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it can be used for maintenance and improvements on conservation land?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
An update on green communities. The Green Communities Task Force will be submitting their annual report to the Department of Energy Resources by mid-December. And that already submitted? No? Okay. Encapsulates energy savings the town has achieved through energy efficiency projects paid for with Green Communities funding using the identified criteria set forth by DOER. The task force met on November 8th with MRPC Principal Planner Karen Chapman to discuss the technical assistance funding that Ms. Chapman will provide in applying for the next round of Green Communities funding and discuss the potential projects that would achieve the most energy savings for the town. The possible projects would target energy savings at the Town Hall, the Public Safety Building, the Ritter Memorial Building, and Turkey Hill Elementary School. The next step in the process will be an energy audit conducted by an energy consultant. Since the November 8th meeting, Ms. Chapman has contacted Unitil and is in the process of setting up one of their contracted energy assessment consultants to perform a free energy audit at the Town Hall, Public Safety Building, and the Ritter Memorial. Ms. Chapman will contact the town once possible audit dates are known, and we can coordinate with someone who can meet them at those buildings to take them around. The task force will meet again on January 17th, and we'll need to have an application prepared to submit for the competitive funding by March of 2018. A couple announcements. Special town meeting information is now on the website. That was the presentation given at the public hearing on November 9th to the Finance Committee. And one update is that a motion for Article 18 will be to pass over that article. The request to do so came from the regional assessor as the town voted at the September 25th, 2012 special town meeting to approve a pilot with New Gen for the same annual payment. The regional assessor will be meeting with New Gen beginning in December and will begin negotiations, and if the terms are significantly different or different at all from the terms agreed at town meeting, we'll come back to voters at a future town meeting. We encourage public to reach out with any questions they may have on articles and to attend Tuesday, November 28th, special town meeting at 7 p.m. at the middle school, high school. Chase Road Route 13 projects. Bids were received for this project and the low bidder was PJ Albert Inc. of Fitchburg, Mass. And the award date is typically 45 days after the bid opening, and the notice to proceed is typically around 21 days after that. So the official notice hasn't been awarded to the contractor. That company was the low bid. The Summer Street project bids are due December 12th. That's all I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so our first agenda item, and our only business agenda item, is the continuation of our license renewal discussion on earth removal permits. And want to set that up for us?
Yes, so at the last meeting, this is a follow-up from the previous meeting where the building commissioner was coming back to report to the board and has since met with all of the earth removal permit holders, and I'll let him, Gary Rhodes, take over from here.
Good evening. My name is Gary Rhodes. I'm the building commissioner. Since we last met, as I understood, my direction was I needed to better identify where the properties were and what the status of each of the sites were. In order to accomplish that, I went through all your old records and looked at all the earth removal permits back to when they were issued to try to make sure that we clearly identify where the parcel was to where the permit was issued. In some cases, it was very clear where it was. They were tied directly to the map and parcels of the assessor's maps. In some cases, it wasn't that clear, because what it looked like it happened, this is particularly with the Keating, as time went on, they just said, okay, I'd like to do this area over here, or that area over there, and they weren't tied. Even today, we don't, the plans they showed, I have, that we were able to find in the records were minimal at best. So I do have a few suggestions about how to go forward. I did meet with the Montori. Their permit's been in place for about 60 years.
There is a memo in your package, by the way, dated October 10th. Go ahead.
With that permit, it's located, it is on the, tied closely to the, I mean, it is the property as identified on the assessor's maps. I met out there to look at what they were doing. Actually, since that permit was initially issued, there have been several changes to the site, including the flea market that was out front, and there's some greenhouse operation and stuff like this, so it wasn't still, it still didn't, earth removal still didn't incorporate the whole property. And when I did meet with them, I asked, where are you removing the earth materials? And they took me into the back in a little corner, and it was an area where maybe about a quarter of an acre that was still semi-active, but it was clear that there wasn't any earth removed in years. This is, where are you, what's your intention in the future? And they indicated that what they use the material for is just around the property, fill potholes, to use in their greenhouse system. So I said it would be my recommendation to the board of selectmen not to renew your permit unless you were going to actively use it. And they gave me an indication they really didn't see that in the future. Because I said part of those permits is you have to restore it. You can't just leave a vacant area. So it would be my recommendation to the board that that permit for the Montori not be renewed. And they seem to be okay with that. As it relates to restoration, I could only find like an area about a quarter of an acre. And I don't know if it would be appropriate. Again, it would be my recommendation that a restoration plan wouldn't be needed in that case. The next one I looked at was...
Hold on.
So the restoration plan, in your memo, you talk about just grass. So do you believe that that's sufficient, given the topography of the land there?
Based on where it was, I felt it was.
Okay.
Again, like I say, it was very, very minimal. I wouldn't know what to do other than that.
Okay.
And there's even an area that was partially, maybe even reverted to a wetland. There was standing water in areas. So I don't know much more that could be done in that area, but I feel that what was there, the grass, let's say it's about a quarter of an acre, probably not much bigger than this room, that's left that had been mined.
Okay, raised a little bit of a red flag there when you said a wetland area, because if it's a wetland area, then that would require Conservation Commission approval.
If any type of restoration was done, possibly. But again, what I saw was standing water. I'm not a wetland biologist, so I can't classify areas. But it was just a wet area that was on the site. That's why I'm saying I don't feel that, much restoration would be needed there. I just felt the best thing to do was just leave it alone, let the grass, let nature take its course.
Okay, so the grade is fairly level. It's not, we're not talking about a steep grade. Okay.
At most, where I was seeing where they were removing it, they had a cut on a slope, maybe 8 feet tall.
Okay.
And then it was up, they looked like they had removed about 8 feet. And the slopes were not excessive, that they would cause any type of collapse or any danger that I could see. You'd have to really work hard to hurt. If somebody went in there and started hand digging like a kid, there could be an issue, but that could be anywhere in town.
Okay.
Any other questions on the Montori one? Is there anybody here from Montori that wants to make a statement? No? Okay. Make a motion and do these one at a time?
I would make a motion not to renew the earth removal permit number 1 for Ralph Montori Construction Company.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. I deliberately didn't include the restoration plan because while I appreciate Mr. Rhodes' perspective that we shouldn't require the closure plan, I just want to find out from Conservation if they have any concerns about vegetation on that slope and if they would recommend any vegetation prior to hitting that puddle. So I kind of want to hold off on the requirements for the restoration plan. I'd like Matt Morrow to take a look at it.
Okay.
And I have a question on the earth removal closure standards that we always also received a copy of. Is this an okay time to ask that?
Sure.
It talks about stormwater and not making it worse. Can't we do better than that and ask them to make it better?
Yeah, I think we've got to revise that whole regulation. And looking at it, it's very, very vague, and it talks about September 1st of the year, any area that hasn't been utilized for 12 months shall be restored according to the standards. We're not enforcing that. So I think it's crazy to have a regulation we don't enforce. I also think we need to look at this regulation in regards to the stormwater standards, because they don't match up. So I think that's perhaps a different workshop that we're going to have to schedule.
Okay, maybe we can add it to our, all of
Workshops.
our rules and regulation discussions, and just make sure that we cover that as well.
And I'd really like to look at what other communities have for standards for earth removal, because this is a very old regulation, and I think it needs a lot of work.
Let's move on to Powell.
Okay, the next one I visited was the Powells. They also were tied closely to, or are identified on the town's assessor's maps. The first one was the property out on Goodrich. It encompassed about 16 acres of where earth has been removed. At this point, all of the material has been removed except for maybe about an acre. What they did is where they have been removed, it's just a flat area. It has not been restored in any form. With that one, I was recommending that the earth removal permit be continued. However, I do believe that some type of closure plan should be provided for the 15 acres that have been removed. When I talked to the Powells, they indicated to me, because it's actually adjacent to a place where they have horses and a little horse farm, they wanted to possibly loam and seed it and either use it as pasture or for growing hay. So in that case would be a possibility of using that as the future use of that property. But again, that would be something for the board to consider. But in this case, I do recommend that the earth removal permit be extended. However, a closure for the 15 acres that have been removed in some form be implemented. The second part of it is, it's a little more complicated. The Powells had another earth removal permit on the limits of Shirley Road. To where that's located, that you probably, if you go out there today, you know where they have their store, and to the right of it, you'll see like two Quonset hut buildings that are being used, and you'll see material being processed in the back. In the back is where there was an earth removal permit that was granted, but it was granted in conjunction with a site plan and special permit through the planning board. What the planning board did in that is they actually incorporated in there a closure plan for that property, which was basically that it was so flat, there was some drainage set up for it, all of this type of things. The problem I saw was that all the material has been removed. There's no question about that, and I would recommend that the earth removal permit not be extended. But for the restoration, they did not build it consistent with what the plan that was approved by the planning board in their permits. If the board agrees that the license should be, earth removal permit should not be removed, I would then work with the Powells to bring them, redirect them back to the planning board for an amendment of their site plan to make it consistent or with what they have actually built.
Now, when you met with the Powells, did you indicate to them that you were recommending not renewing permit number 54? Were they aware of that?
Yeah, the one on because they're really, on the one on the limits of Shirley, there's no material left to be done.
Okay.
What they're doing now is they're actually using it as processing of material that's brought in. That doesn't require an earth removal permit. The earth removal bylaw is very clear that it's only for removal, it's not for processing, which we call manufacturing. That's a completely separate use.
And they have a special permit for that?
Excuse me?
Do they have a permit for that, the processing?
That is part of where they're, I believe, in violation of the permit issued by the planning board. The planning board permit does not include what's happening out there. That's why I want them to go back to the planning board
Okay.
to amend their special permit and clean that aspect of it up. And then also, whatever type of closure is part of that would be incorporated into the planning board decision.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just
Is there anybody from PAL that wants to speak? Okay.
Okay, I would make a motion that we not renew permit number 54 to Powell Stone and Gravel. And that we, have you contacted the planning board?
Have I what?
Have you contacted the planning board or notified them?
Yes, I have been in
Okay.
contact with the land use director, so he's aware of this also.
Okay. So I'm going to do this in two different steps. I'm going to recommend that we not renew permit number 54 to Powell Stone and Gravel.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. The closure plan is a little bit different in that there's a special permit that exists that was issued by the planning board. Now, whether or not this board, as the licensing authority for earth removal permits, had any input into that closure plan, I'm not sure. But the closure plan, it appears, has to be approved by this board as well as the planning board. Because it says here, the closure plan, which is part of the planning board special permit / site approval, will need to be revised. So I'm not quite sure where the authority lies with that closure plan.
Okay, I guess I was reading it slightly different. My interpretation, and not that I'm an expert in any way, was that we just voted not to renew the earth removal permit, and that now they're working under a special permit from planning that required a closure, and that they haven't complied with that.
Right, but any closure plan has to be acceptable to this board as well as a licensing authority for earth removal. So I'm not quite sure how we handle the closure plan, because apparently there's currently a closure plan on file with the planning board. But I don't know that this board has had any review of that closure plan, and I certainly think we should have. So perhaps we can get a copy of the closure plan that was required by the planning board and work with them in conjunction, because as the licensing authority, we certainly have input into that, but I'm not quite sure what was incorporated into their special permit. It appears, from what I've heard, that there may be violations of the special permit that are currently occurring that need to be addressed and need to be worked through the planning board, but this board should have input onto the closure plan.
Okay, so let's get the planning board to weigh in on this, and then we'll determine if we need to work jointly. How about the first one? 32.
Okay. I would make a motion to renew permit number 54 issued in
32.
I'm sorry. 32? Okay, I'm sorry. Permit number 32, which encompasses 16 acres, with the stipulation that the areas that are no longer active, a closure plan be submitted, as recommended by the building official.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Does that make sense?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The last one?
Okay. Keating is the most complicated one we have out there. There are 11 permits that are over 700 acres of land incorporated in there. There's been many changes over the years on the permits that have been, the properties used out there. Some areas where earth removal permits were issued are now actively part of their manufacturing, their gravel, their crushed stone operation, so they're all tied up there. The other thing that has happened over the years with this one, these permits that were issued were not tied to the parcels. So the plans that I found in the Selectmen's office were minimal at best, and they kind of gave you a sense of where it was. I'm sure that when they were done, the Keating knew exactly where they were, but it was kind of very loose. So with that, and there's also clear to me that there's been a lot of, I believe, some of the areas have been finished with their earth removal, at least in my opinion, based on what I've read in it. What I'm recommending on this one is a several step approach. Because it's such a large property, I'm recommending that all of the permits be renewed for 1 year, but with several stipulations. I think it's important that the permits are tied to parcels rather than just loops. And in some cases, it makes sense that when they're adjoining parcels, that if it's appropriate, that they be joined together. And there's a couple areas, I think one area I can think of in particular, there's like 3 permits that are just 3 different parcels there, so they should be tied together. I feel that they should provide a engineering report to the board on each of the sites as to what, if any, material is left to be removed from the site. In some cases, there may still be material there. In some cases, there may not be. But their engineer would be able to do that, because a lot of the permits that are out there, they talk about distance to groundwater. They can't remove so much, I think it's like 4 feet to the groundwater. You can't tell that by just walking out on that site. But those areas that have been mined, they're basically just flat areas. You know, they've started to reseed themselves, in some cases reforest themselves. But I don't think that's adequate for a closure plan. I believe that they need to come back with some type of engineering. I have met with them and their engineer. I've met on a number of occasions since we last were here. They've been very cooperative with us. They seem willing. They understand the situation that we're under and where they are. In some cases, I don't believe that in the long run there will be permits there. Like where they're crushing stone right now, you know, there's an earth removal permit there, but why are we having an earth removal when there's no earth there to be removed? So we'll be looking, I think that a full engineering plan tied to each of these will be the best solution to deal with this going forward. And then when we're done, it would be my recommendation that these permits would expire and then new ones be given that identify 2 parcels. It's sort of an incentive, and this is where the building inspector part of it comes in. If they don't do this within a year or any other extension that you may grant, that all the permits be required to be lapsed, because they're required to give you some kind of documentation. It hasn't happened, but then again, they haven't been requested, and they seem to be willing, but again, that's that building inspector side that here's a carrot and a stick. But again, that's all my recommendation at this point.
So I have a couple questions. Where they have an earth removal permit, they're processing, is that very similar to Powell's? They're doing something they're not supposed to be doing?
No, it's not. There, it's a little different. Powell's ended up had to go for a special permit in the site plan. This one, some of that manufacturing, I actually found some of your records that showed that they had actually told the town they were going to do it. It predates a lot of our special permit requirements and stuff, so I don't really see that what they're doing is any violations, but it's just not reflective of the permits that are there. So at least at this point, I haven't identified anything that says there's a zoning violation. It's more of a matter of cleaning up where these permits are located.
Okay. And you know, there's a letter here that talks, it looks like a very old letter. It talks about the properties and plans for the different properties. You know, and one is like Part C is a proposed site for a $3 million expanded shale lightweight aggregate plant.
Yes.
Is that just something that's gone by the wayside? Because that's right next to the lake.
This is actually was one of the things I found in your file. And there's actually a plan that goes with it that showed that they had indicated to the town that they were going to make these changes. That's part of where I said, like, one of the areas where the manufacturing plants are, they notified the town that they were going to do it. And there wasn't anything that said they can't do it. Since there wasn't any violation or they notified us, I don't see that as an issue. But it's not that I'm saying they have more rights than, but this I think is, again, is a general map, not a specific thing that allows for anything additional. What's here has been built.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so the shale lightweight aggregate plant is there?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Is there anybody from Keating that would like to say anything for the record?
I can.
Please.
So my name is Mo Langlois. I'm the operations manager for PJ Keating. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Rhodes for his time and effort helping us decipher this. This has been kind of a confusing thing for us. We concur with his suggestions, and should the board approve it, we will abide by it.
Okay, I would make a motion that we approve a one-year extensions for the 11 earth removal permits for the PJ Keating Company with the stipulation that during that one-year period, they work with the building commissioner to look at all of the the permits and make adjustments as appropriate by combining appropriate parcels and permits, that they provide a full engineering report as requested by the building commissioner, as well as a closure plan for all parcels that will no longer be utilized for earth removal.
Second.
Is there any discussion? My only clarification is it's, as opposed to a year from today, it's a year from when we would have approved this to end with
Okay.
to end with all the normal earth removal endings. Is that
Well,
appropriate?
Okay, so my concern would be, what is the normal timeline? It's the end of the year, correct?
August.
It's the end of August.
So are we looking to renew these until August, or are we looking for a year from August, just to August? Is that, my concern would be that that's not going to be sufficient time for them to get all the engineering done.
I think that is a good target date right now. It's just, permits are renewed by their own nature until, I think it's August 31st. And I'm just recommend that they be continued to August 31st. I just
And then
felt-
possibly another extension. Okay, so that I would recommend that they be granted until August 31st, and if additional extensions are needed, you can come back.
Now, will the town need to improve its documentation as well?
With what, excuse me?
It's
Can I get a
improved.
second to the?
Oh, second.
Okay, go ahead.
So does the town need to improve its documentation?
Well, we will when we get their documentation.
All this will be coming to the board.
Yeah.
This is the information that they will be giving to you. You're the permit granting authority. You will be the one that be given it. To the extent that there are closure plans, you would have to approve them. Where they change the location and stuff, you would be the one that would approve it. All this stuff is will be documented and presented to you. If there are areas where the material can be still be removed, that'll be presented to you, and then you can work forward on how to address that.
So how do we prevent this from happening in the future?
We look at our regulations and tighten our procedures. I think that one of the things that we just talked about is having a workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Righty.
Here's the actual permit.
These are the actual permits we need to. And these are only the ones.
Only the ones that were renewed.
So you gotta sign them. The other paragraph. Just do that at the executive session, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
It's just me? Okay, great.
All right.
We have minutes for October 10th. Are there any warrants? Okay. Just one? I have an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $512,063.76. Any action file issues? All righty. So, we are now going to move, we're going to adjourn, not adjourn, but we're going to pause for just a couple of seconds while we move down to our table. And our purpose is to begin our workshop on town facilities and grounds. And when we all get down there, and those that are going to join us will join us. And we are televising a workshop, which is always a challenge, but if we all use microphones and try to be conscious of that, it should be helpful for not only the note takers, but for the public at home who are trying to keep up with what we're doing. Just as a note, after the workshop, we will go into executive session, but we'll talk about that at the end of the workshop. Okay? So we're gonna do that. from the Parks Commission and DPW Director on the status of town parks, fields, and beach, including long-term maintenance. And again, let's share our mics. Let's make sure whoever's talking does it into a microphone.
Yeah, we can share. Yeah, sure.
And if at any time the public needs to be part of this, which I'm not going to recommend until we get to public comment, but we're going to ask them to come to the podium over here. All right.
What's the title of the document we're looking at? Which artificial turf?
I don't think we have one. I didn't see one. No, it's just a...
No document on the first one.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Got to use paper. My goodness. So, we're going to talk about the status of town parks, fields, and beach, including long-term maintenance.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
I'll try to be brief. I'm going to give you a status of a number of parks in town. I'm going to begin with Marshall Park. As you know, parking has been an issue there for years, and one attempt to create a parking lot did not end well. At the conclusion of that project, we asked Whitman and Bingham to do a survey of the entire park property, establishing definitively the property lines. We have now asked them to overlay that survey with any areas they feel could be incorporated as parking areas, from the entrance of 2A out to Chestnut Street. Even though the first go-around was a failure, the traffic problem is still there. So I'm actively working with Chief Marino to integrate any plans they have for individual parking areas, to integrate that into a traffic plan as well. So that's underway. We've established for the first time a definitive turf maintenance plan for all three fields, the big baseball field, the softball field, and Powell Field. This is our first scheduled turf maintenance go-around. We've also completed the backstop configuration, which was quite an issue to protect the town and the Park Commission or the Park Department from litigation, since foul balls were damaging property behind home plate. That configuration has been completed finally, and the netting is not in place because we felt it was prudent not to put the netting up there since the season was over, and it would just lie there and in the elements would probably deteriorate. So this spring it'll be up, it'll be in a pulley system, so next season we'll be able to draw it in to get it away from the elements. One thing that's difficult with this field and with all the fields, and a member of the commission will expand upon this, is the scheduling and the fees for all those fields. They have attempted to change the culture. Fees had never been charged uniformly, and there's never really been a schedule. This has been extremely difficult for this commission, and they've worked very hard to establish that, and they can speak to that. We also have to police the unscheduled use of that field, which goes along with the scheduling. It's unfortunate, but people can't, with so much use and so many teams, people can't just show up and start using the area. This all has to be scheduled very tight. The athletic director will tell you there aren't many afternoons or weekends where that isn't scheduled up.
Plan someplace, a schedule, so that people would know when it's available?
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we get through all of this, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, get through all of this, and then have the commission, it's their part of it. Mine is more just the nuts and bolts and mechanics of what's being done on the field. I'll leave that to the commission. But that is an important component of that, for sure. As we conclude the successful negotiations with the school department on the turf field, and we're all very optimistic that that is and will happen, we'll then begin, once that document is memorialized, the commission will begin negotiations with the school department on the use of Marshall Park. Marshall Park, as you know, is used for varsity baseball, junior varsity baseball, and both components of softball. And they have, up until this point, not been charged any fees. Fitzgerald Field off of Reservoir Road. Fitzgerald Field, like McNally and other places in town, the antiquated playground equipment was moved to eliminate our liability there. And this worked out very well at Fitzgerald Field. It's kind of a nice landing on the left as you face it from Reservoir Road. We also reconfigured the small parking lot to the left and regraded that, eliminating some old telephone poles and things like that were in the way. We'd like to initiate the same turf management program on this field. That has to go along with the fees that are charged, so we know we'll be able to sustain that over time. So those are married together, the fees, and obviously what we're going to be able to do with the field. Our plan in that upper level where the playground material was is to erect some sort of, I'll say, gazebo-like, just 4 posts or 6 posts with a roof, maybe a couple of picnic tables. Typically, that's a younger crowd that plays there, and this will give parents and children some place to get out of the weather, have a snack or whatever, and take the place of the playground equipment. McNally Field on Whalen.
Just a clarifying question, we don't have to get into details. There is some playground equipment at Marshall Park, too. Is that going to be removed?
No, that's up to date.
It is up to date?
Yep.
Okay.
The surface may have to be changed underneath, but that's more modern equipment.
Okay. And the playground equipment at Fitzgerald, is that going to be replaced with more modern playground equipment or just this gazebo?
This is to be determined.
Okay.
This is my
Good enough.
plan
Good
as
enough.
it goes before the Park Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. McNally Field off of Whalum Road, not to be redundant, but again, the turf management has to come into play there. That field itself is a little rough somewhere down the road, depending upon fees and finances. We should look to resod some of that surface and regrade the outfield. It really tips down towards the fence. We want to look at the legalities of the snack shack as they come together with Board of Health restrictions and make sure that what we're doing there is compliant. How the food's prepared, if it's prepared, if we're just doing, package, that's it, thanks Dennis, packaged food, that's also to be looked at Marshall because there's a snack shack there as well. We also want to look to rehab the parking area, which is a little rough, and then as that development adjacent to McNally Field winds to its conclusion, from what I understand, and I haven't seen this written, is that the developer has gifted to the town, and some of you may know this, a 100-foot buffer to his project. We want to see what that looks like, and we want to be able to protect the kids from the project and the project from balls too. So we'll wait till that develops, and that'll be planned out as that comes to fruition. Wallace Park. I think everybody knows there's an article on a town meeting warrant for Wallace Park. I may let the commission speak to this. We had a meeting Thursday. We're acutely aware, by the way, that we tried to post this meeting, but were unsuccessful. So we're going to walk a very fine line to make sure that we're complying with the open meeting law, Mr. Chairman. There has been a groundswell of excitement over there by the neighbors, and you've seen Chris Letarte here, who sort of spearheaded that. We had successfully put a mere $12,000 through the capital plan to enhance the area after the equipment was removed. We didn't know at that point that there was going to be such support and such, aggressive support for the playground area. So we went back and helped Chris. We removed some material, and now that organization, that neighborhood organization, will come to town meeting for another sum of money. They have not brought to the Park Commission or to the board or to the Capital Planning Committee any information and in the form of a plan, so this might be difficult from this end, the Park Commission end, to completely support that. But let me say here that there's not a one of us that doesn't support this community effort to move forward with it, but we are all painfully aware of how slowly sometimes municipalities work and that there is a process. So I think if we can join those two together, we'll have great success. If not this month, certainly next year. We have to look, what they have to consider over there too is that if that's going to be a basketball court and continue to be a basketball court, then that's going to need some work. I resurfaced that about 20 years ago, 21 years ago. It's going to be due shortly for the same resurfacing, and we started a program where we were trying to get money to repair or replace the fencing around the basketball court. So we've done two sides. There are two sides that need replacement desperately. So the commission, along with the neighborhood group, probably sit together and decide what's going to happen there, and see if we can come to they can come to some sort of an agreement on what will be done with the basketball court. As you might know, there's a very small percentage of Lunenburg residents that use that court. Lastly, the town beach. I'm going to just cover a couple of things here and then turn this over to Karen Menard, who's done a tremendous amount of work here. It might be the one that's a little more complicated from my end. The addition of sand on a yearly basis was sort of taken for granted. This year I brought it to the Conservation Commission, who determined that that was okay to do. They want to limit the amount of sand, but now we're hand in hand with the Concom and knowing that that's okay for us to do that. There will be a piece on the capital plan. We don't know where that's going to go, giving the building reuse committee to repair the roof and the wall disconnect at the beach building. Over time, it's an old structure, and the rafters have separated at the top of the wall in the front of the building. The wall's starting to bow out. It could possibly stay there for years, but it's certainly something that's not going to heal itself, and that should be addressed. And then we also have to address the park and the town liability of that playground area to the left facing the lake, which has no access through the building itself, but has a gated access, which doesn't really allow for the town employees to supervise what's happening there. So we have to take a hard look at whether that is going to be a playground, who's going to supervise it, will it remain locked? It's just sort of a dead area there. It's unfortunate because the Lions Club has given a great deal of that equipment and money towards that equipment. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Karen and maybe just pick right up. What's that? Excuse me? Oh, the future. Oh, yeah, the vision for the future. Sure. Before this gets lost. Thanks, Dennis. it seems each year during budget season, I bring up the same sort of wish list, and one that I think could gain traction would be the development of fields adjacent to the Cap landfill off of Youngs Road. Some of you may have heard me expound upon that. It's a wide open area, fairly level, and has water and sewer right to the gate of that field. The athletic director will tell you, as many of you may know, that we're short of fields, and with the expansion of different sports, lacrosse, et cetera, and more people playing, which is just fantastic, I think. And even with the new fields, we can run short of fields. So out there, we will bring this to you over the course of a year or 2 years, develop a plan, and try to move on that. But with that, and the last thing I'm going to speak about here is that piece of property that's off of 2A, maybe most recognizable by the most recent foray into expansion, which is the marijuana grow field. I think the town has really missed the boat on this. That field, if it's not already dedicated to that organization, which my inquiry says it's not, the contractor has for years offered the town that piece of property, the entire piece of property, in exchange for some amount of material adjacent to the Cap landfill, with a plan to leave it in a particular configuration. So the way I see this is it's a win-win for the town. The town loses no land, gets the land by Youngs Road regraded, and acquires the land off of Route 2A. I think if we're able to put this into an RFP and dot our I's, cross our T's with legal assistance, it's something that we could bring before the board, at least for their consideration. It's not ready for your consideration yet, so it's full of holes, but in my mind, the decision might be an easy one. Marijuana growers, open space. I think it might be a tough go for the marijuana growers there, but so that finishes my part of it.
I just want to comment on that issue. I think, it's something that has been before this board, the issue of the land swap, I think is what you're talking about, in exchange for the material on the property off of Pleasant Street. I think it makes sense. The couple of the different hurdles we ran into is, one is whether or not it was considered a change of use, because for the year-long operation of the earth removal, it would have to go before the legislature to take it out of conservation. That was ambiguous whether or not it was a change of use. So if we could ask our new town council to take a look at that issue, sure. Because that was one of the major hurdles that we hit.
I agree.
So if we can take a look at that,
yeah.
And see whether or not it's doable within the guidelines of conservation restrictions.
But don't you think it has merit?
I've always thought it's a great idea. I've always supported it.
I don't know why it really didn't gain traction. There's so many things. Nobody really dove into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody really dove into that.
But if we can talk to council about that, Matt
sure.
Morrow's certainly very familiar with it.
Yep.
He did not believe it would be considered a change of use by our council at that time.
But I mean, the end game, literally and figuratively,
is a benefit to the town.
Well, there's fields here,
right,
and there's fields there.
Right. Well, the recreation expansion on that property was going to be amazing, because there was talks about walkways and parks.
Yeah, it's really something. So we need somebody to spearhead that.
Yeah.
Perhaps the town manager.
Ready to do already.
The DPW. Okay, so we left off with the, and Phyllis, maybe as I turn it over to the park people, they could better answer your question before we forget about that question, which I'm sure is a good one. But we're going to have Karen at least start to talk about the fees as they relate to the town beach and other properties under the Park Commission.
Yep. So The primary focus at the beach this year was to get the positions at the beach, the beach coordinator and the lifeguard positions listed on the salary administrative plan. We had to create job descriptions. All of that went to the personnel committee last spring, and it's now on the town warrant. There's a warrant article for the special town meeting next week that hopefully will see approval. So that was the big thing, is to get these positions listed as official. So we actually had employees. We are also slowly, and I emphasize slowly, working to making sure that the beach is a self-sustaining enterprise. So it's we're bringing in what it's costing us to run the beach. That's going to be a slow process. This year, we increased the beach passes from $40 a family to $50 a family, and $10 doesn't seem like much, but the timing of it was slightly off. We had done this shortly before the season was starting, so people had already planned for it. We, had some residents from town come to our meeting, just so they made sure that we were aware that people had already been planning for this. So we were gradual in our increase in those fees. They hadn't been increased in over 10 years. When I asked when the last time they were increased, nobody really had an answer, so it could definitely have been longer than that. We sold 128 family passes, and a family pass could be anything from a family of 3 to a family of 7 or 8. It depends on however many are in your family. We also opened it up to non-residents this year, a limited number of passes. There were 25 passes that they could have sold. We sold 15. We had 2 single passes and 9 senior passes sold. And I'd like to see us work at increasing those numbers. Sometimes I think people don't realize the beach is there or what the hours are, so that's things we need to work on. The other thing that we had done was swim lessons. I think that will be the first thing that will be self-sustaining. It's just an easier program to adjust fees for, and it's something that we're going to start looking at again early next year.
How many sessions of swim lessons are there?
There were 2 sessions of swim lessons. They run Monday through Friday for 2 weeks, and the last Friday of that 2-week session is a testing day. So if you have a student ready to test into the next level, they come on that day. So it's 9 actual in the water lessons and then 1 testing day. And it was... we raised the prices this year. It was 20, I don't have it right in front of me for some reason. It was either $20 or $25 per student, but it was capped at $60 per family per session. So that's slowly getting to where it needs to be self-sustaining. The one thing that I would like to see happen, and we've discussed it in the past as a commission, right now when you sign up for a beach pass, it's you come into town hall, it's paper and pencil, she makes a list. It's not where it should be. It needs to be digitized. It needs to be, even if it's something that's done online. So we have to sort of start working with Steve Malandrinos to sort of figure out what that process is and the best way to do that. And I'm going to answer your question before I hand this over to probably Mr. McAuliffe on the scheduling piece of it. Right now, unless you contact one of us, you don't know who's on a field and when they're there. I don't know what it looks like on the turf side of it.
The artificial turf? The
artificial turf. But I know the baseball side of it, you need to reach out to one of us. And if you reached out to the DPW, they would probably come back to me and say, is it being used this day? It needs to be automated, and how we're going to automate that, I'm not 100% sure of how we're going to do it. It's something that needs to be done, though, so that anybody can go on, including residents who are, their kids want to go run at the baseball fields. They don't want to show up there if there's a Phillies game going on. Phillies game might be great to watch, but if you have a 5-year-old looking to run the bases, that's not going to happen. So I would like to see something automated for this. It may not happen in the spring, but definitely starting in the summer season, and then moving forward.
It may be connected to the town website somehow, because we'll have a revamped town website.
Yeah, as long as it's something that can be adjusted
Yeah, it's gotta be able to
by
be changed.
myself or one of the other commissioners or somebody within the DPW, because right now, and a great example of this was this year, when I submitted the information to be updated on the town website, I submitted incorrect information. It was just a typo on my part. That folks in town were great in calling it to my attention, but I couldn't get it fixed fast enough to satisfy everybody. And that was because I don't have control over updating what's on the park's website. I have to go through Mr. Malandrinos, and then if he's out of the office or there's a delay, so.
But you must be able to work with him, so you'd have some authority.
Yeah, he told me no.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So whatever it is, if it's linked to the town website, it just needs to be, the schedule piece needs to be approved. There's other like little pieces to the puzzle to make sure that everybody's in compliance with having certificate of insurance in, everybody's paid their fees, that sort of thing. So that is something that is going to be worked on to get done.
Boy, how worthwhile would that be?
Absolutely. It's absolutely.
Out of all the fields that are under the jurisdiction of the Park Commission, are all of them used by group sports? Are all of them scheduled, or are there any of the parks that are not used for team sports? So all of them are?
Correct.
Okay.
At some point or another, all of them are. They're not all season long, every season. We have in the spring and the summer, the 90-foot diamond, which is the one off of Chestnut Street at Marshall Park, that's used by either high school or Phillies. But in the fall, that typically is open because there's not usually a high school age or above bracket that uses the fields during that time.
And the fees associated with that use, where do they go?
So right now, and I sat down with Karen last week and had this conversation, so please correct me if I misunderstood. It's going into the revolving fund for the parks. So right now, do one of you guys want to take this? Because I feel like I'm running into somebody else's turf here.
What's that? Oh, just the fees?
Just the fees in general?
Can I, just before we lose you,
Yeah.
just talk a little bit about swimming, about
Yes.
the beach and swimming lessons. I really think it's important for the town to support children learning to swim. I don't think we should price anybody out of swimming lessons. If the town
I don't
has
think
to,
we will.
if the town has to kick in some money, then I think the town should for that particular purpose. I think every kid should know how to swim.
I don't think we will. I don't think it'll be overpriced. I think that we may have hit it this year. I can't tell you definitely if we have, because I'm still waiting for some numbers to come in from the beach coordinator. It's not that she's not providing them, it's just a matter of she wants to come into a commission meeting herself and sit down and talk. And there was really nothing overly pressing that she had to come in. So I think the next time she sits with us, she'll be able to provide us with the number of hours that their lifeguards were there. We may have hit it. We definitely could have hit the point where this is the price and this will work and this will be great. And even with the town beach passes, somebody said to me the other day, well, what would it take for you to break even on the town beach passes? It could be $100 a family. Right now, we're charging $50. So it's a jump. It's definitely a jump, but it's probably still within reach, and it may be something that we can offer, especially around swim lessons. We may be able to offer something in terms of, funding for, or waivers for kids that can't afford it, to make sure that we do. We are offering swim lessons to the kids that need it the most, and which is every kid in town.
Right. Well, I mean, one thing about offering waivers, often people are embarrassed and don't take you up on it, I just think that, if the town has to kick some money in so we can keep swimming lessons affordable, I would definitely be for that.
But you talked about trying to make the program itself self-sustaining, the beach and the swim program. The DPW superintendent talked about some of the building repairs that need to be done, as well as the playground that's not accessible, that the Lions Club has put money in. So I'm curious as to whether or not you've looked at ways to make that playground accessible, or ways in what your plan is for the building repair.
Okay.
Is that a capital expenditure, or what is it that you're going to do?
If I may?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did mention, Paul, if I didn't, I'm sorry. It's on the capital plan.
Okay.
The repair of the roof.
It is on the
It
capital.
is on the capital plan. It's just floating in years now because of the building reuse and when the surveys and how it's all going to shake out.
Okay.
But it is on the 5-year plan.
Okay.
In terms of the like a no man's land playground, there was once a door that allowed people to traverse from the playground through the building into the beach area. The former commission blocked that up because they felt that they didn't want to dedicate an individual to watch over that, or that they were better placed in the beach area. It was a matter of personnel, because the children could, exit out that door, be in the playground, and not be supervised. So it was blocked up, as it was walled off. And that. So that's a discussion we'll have to have. What are we going to do with that playground?
Yeah, and I guess I would question that. I mean, I'm just thinking about when I take my grandkids to a playground or to BB Kids, or I take them to Hampton Beach, nobody's supervising them on the playground except me. So I would question why that issue of liability came up.
Yeah, and I have no idea because that was before our time. I can tell you that as a current commissioner, if there is no direct access from the building, it concerns me. It concerns me because the traffic on that road, the patrons of that beach to begin with will complain about the traffic on the road, even just loading and unloading their kids on the side of the road. To have kids that would be going unsupervised from the beach through the house, out into the road, and then into the parking lot, that the whole thing needs to be looked at to make sure that if we do open it, if it does get redesigned so that the playground equipment isn't so antiquated, there's a safe way for those kids to go in and out so that they can play, and there's no, liability that I guess comes back to the town if we were to have something and the kids ran from one place to another and got hit by a car on the way through.
So you have to go on the roadway to get
Yes,
to the playground?
yes.
Okay, well, that's
Yeah.
absolutely a liability.
Yes.
Okay.
So can you get into the playground when the beach isn't open? Or is it locked?
It's currently locked. I don't know when the last time anybody's used it. The playground equipment that is still there that needs to be removed, it's more than just being old. It's not, the surface underneath is no longer compliant. It's also very close to fencing. I don't believe we have the right clearance around swing sets. That playground is going to need more than just, unlock the door and throw some new sand down. It's going to need, I think it's going to need a considerable amount of consideration, and I don't know where that's going to fall in our process of looking at all the parks and making sure playgrounds are.
You mentioned the Lions. I'm curious as to what the Lions have done relative to the playground.
I know they put a swing set there, at least, and this was years ago.
Okay, so this
Years
is not,
ago.
it's still...
It's not in the last couple of years, no.
Okay, because I thought there were improvements in the last couple of years.
But there was the equipment, in my estimation, when we ripped it out wholesale, it seemed to me that equipment at least, or perhaps not there, but some of that equipment might be repurposed, so it was too good to throw away. The way it's configured in that small beach area, they had contributed the swing set. I think there were some of those things that are on a big spring, so to go back and forth like this, a horse or some other thing. I don't know what they're called, but a couple of those were also given to the Park Commission by the Lions.
Okay.
And I can forward you, last summer, I had spent some time and I went to all the playgrounds and I photographed all of the equipment that were at each playground. I can forward you what was there and what's there so you can see what's there now. And I think just by looking at it, you'll see where the concern lies.
Okay, so you talked about these programs becoming self-sufficient, and I guess I'm just questioning, do we have an idea of what the cost is versus the revenue generation?
So that's something that I'm working on now. I met with Karen Brochu last week to try to get a better understanding of what our finances look like, what's going in, what's going out, that sort of thing. I've been on the commission now for 18 months, with, I think both of these gentlemen were with me. And just the first year or so, it was really playing catch-up of where we should have been, that we weren't. We needed to get there. So now's the time where I really need to start digging into the numbers and seeing what everything looks like on paper. I mean, I know what we've expended for salaries. I know what we had, budgeted for a line item for salaries, that sort of stuff. That I can answer. But how much longer it's going to take us to, come to agreements on what it's going to take to create this.
And Paula, it's also, before we look at setting fees as to what it might cost, we have to establish those costs as we try to institute turf management, taking care of the field, regular fertilization, watering, treating the things that have to be done, like to a grass surface, that really have never been done. We don't have solid numbers for each facility as to what it costs us each year.
Right,
we do have some electricity, some water charges. We're going to have a better handle on Marshall now, the big park, because we're doing the management plan. So for the commission who are struggling with fees at best, they have to have a number to target. I have to help them with the target.
We certainly should have an idea currently of the revenue that's generated by the fees that are in place.
I can tell you what's been generated for the town beach. The total brought in was $9,301.
Well, I'm sure the operation is...
And that was for everything. And then the lessons themselves, which are part, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, were part of that $9,300. Do you remember?
Because that was the
total. Yeah. So within that $9,300 was swim lessons, which were $2,080. Which is why we may be fairly close on the swim lesson side. And I think a very reasonable rate. I had spent a lot of time last year going through what other towns were charging, and we were definitely still on the low end, no matter which way we cut it. So that was what was brought in, and then the remaining was the remaining $7,300 or so was what we brought in for beach passes.
Okay. And do you have the revenue on the other facilities under the jurisdiction of the parks?
I don't have the...
Now, do those go into the same fund, or is it a different fund? Or where do the fees generated from the various fields go?
We haven't, when Karen came in, we were talking about it.
I'm sorry, Karen, but...
There really hasn't been any revenue generated from those fields, with the exception of small amounts that we saw from like the Phillies but it wasn't anything, put it this way, they weren't generating enough revenue, at least in my opinion, to offset the costs of them using those fields.
No, I understand they're not offsetting the cost. I guess I'm just wondering, are there fees currently in place, and do we have any idea of how long those fees have been in place?
Yes, so we started, I'll use Marshall Park as an example because it's one of the most used in the Little League program, which uses everything. So Marshall Park has there's 4 fields. There's T-ball, there's 2 smaller diamonds, and then the big diamond. The Phillies came in and you wanted to use the big diamond. We entered into an agreement with them the beginning of last summer for use of their field. I off the top of my head, I don't remember what we charged. I think it was something $1,200, something along those lines.
And the Phillies are?
The Phillies are a...
Men's baseball.
Okay.
Men's baseball.
Okay.
Yeah, adults.
And then the Little League program, we currently charge them per head, so we charge them $10 per head or per player for use of all the fields that they use for, and that covers their practice and their game times. It's nowhere near enough. That was something that was actually in place before I came on board. I believe from the minutes that I read, it was established about 6 months before I came on board, but I don't think anything was collected until we started really pushing to make sure that money was collected.
Okay, so that's in the last 18 months.
That's in the last 18 months. And then we do have other organizations that want use of the fields, so we create January timeframe, we created a user fee, like a per hour user fee. It's a short-term agreement. The forms are actually on the town website. And for most of the fields, the grass fields, it's $25 an hour. So if an AAU basketball team wants to come in, that's what they would pay per hour. And we have had some, but they're $100 or less usually for their usage.
But I would think with the Little League specifically, I mean, you've got hundreds of kids. I mean, granted, it's not a ton of revenue, but where is that revenue going?
That goes into the
Revolving fund.
But I don't know that it's always been collected.
So I think along with the, as we sit through the beginning of the Selectmen's meeting tonight, you guys are going through a lot of the different field.
Earth removal permits.
Earth permits and a lot of stuff. We're kind of doing the same thing on our end. A lot of these permits and regulations never really have been looked at in a while. So we're kind of systematically going through, and one of the things we felt strongly about was, now that Lunenburg's at a level where we need to schedule these fields tighter, people pay good money for the youth groups to use them. There's other teams coming in from out of town playing. There's parents traveling to get to a game. They want to make sure that they have a field. And in order to do that, you have to try to organize some of this. And Jack on his end is saying, hey, I'm over here. We don't have a budget really for field maintenance, trash, fixing things, fencing, all of this stuff, where a lot of the stuff over the years was done in kind. So certain youth groups would say, hey, we need a scoreboard, or we want to fix the fence, or we want a new dugout. We'll do that. And now we're saying, okay, you could still do that. You have to come to the board, you have to do that, but we have other maintenance that Jack needs to get done on the fields, and we need to be able to organize that, especially with all the regulations there is nowadays about pesticides and what you can put on the field, what you can't. So we're slowly but surely trying to organize that, and as these field money comes in, we're going to be able to use that in order to upkeep the field. And as we get better at it, we're going to be adjusting the fees accordingly based on what Jack comes back to us on a yearly basis with maintenance and various things. And then if we ever get new fields, we'll be able to expand and maybe use some of those monies for new fields, or be able to have some passive and active recreation combos and be able to utilize that. So that's kind of a little bit of the history of kind of where we're kind of dipping our toe in the water and kind of getting these things organized.
So when you talk about the capital plan on a yearly basis, and Jack, you ran through some of the states of some of the fields, are you going to do similar to what you do for capital planning, a 5-year plan of the improvements at the various fields over a period of time, so we know what that target number is to get to?
Perfectly honest, Paul, I don't have a definitive plan yet for these fields. These are just projections of what we'd like to do. When you mean a capital plan outside of the capital plan?
I guess I'm looking for a long-range plan for the field. You talked about some improvements. For example, you talked about the building, which is on the radar.
Mm-hmm.
But you just mentioned fence improvements, and the playground is a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
The playground, the fence improvements. I'm assuming there's going to be other building maintenance, whether it be the shack at Marshall Park or whether it be the parking at Marshall Park. But looking at all of the fields and putting together, similar to some of the worksheets that we'll see tonight, about finances is, okay, in 2019 we're going to do this, in 2020 we're going to do this, in 2021 we're going to do this, so that we have an idea of, I think you're right, when you talk about setting fees, you have to know what that target number is. So you need to know what the revenue is that you're going to need over the next 5-10 years to make the necessary improvements at these facilities. So I'm wondering if that's something you guys are working on crafting.
Let me just kind of reset where we are. Okay, we're having a workshop here, and the last item on the workshop is for the Board of Selectmen, the Parks Commission, the Town Manager, and the School Committee to discuss next steps.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I think that what I've heard so far is from our first presentation, we've gotten a flavor for some issues like fees, scheduling, capital, self-sufficiency, and then maybe some side issues like infrastructure parking, which we may see in other areas as well. I want to suggest that we kind of say, okay, that's a good start. Let's kind of move on and talk about the relationship between the school committee and the parks vis-à-vis the artificial turf. Then we'll talk about the relationship between the selectmen and the school relative to some properties like Turkey Hill, et cetera. And then begin to take a look at what does that mean in terms of next steps?
Well,
Because I think the capital plan is one that's going to be overarching for everything.
Well, but that's not what I'm hearing, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm hearing that there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be addressed, and we saw that with Wallace Park, that, you know, I'd like to understand the long-range plan, and I don't know whether everyone intended to stay all night to talk about, to target everybody else's discussion. So saving that for the end, I don't know that that's...
Well, it may not get done tonight, but the point is, I don't think it's appropriate to talk about spending dollars to fix a particular building or a particular fence outside of a total capital plan for our town facilities. I mean, we have an article coming up on the town meeting in next week that says, should we appropriate money for one playground? To me, that's one item that's in a massive discussion that we started today, and it also relates to the buildings and several other things.
Well, I don't agree with you at all. We have not talked at all, at least in all the years that I've been on the board, about incorporating the parks as part of our building reuse. It wasn't on the radar for building reuse. It wasn't on the radar.
It's not about building reuse. It's about the town capital budget.
Okay, and I don't disagree with you that a capital budget should be presented for all aspects of this. I guess what I'm asking this newly created Parks Commission, they've talked about dipping their toes in to a lot of different things and trying to get their handle on the fees. All I'm suggesting that in addition to that is they start looking at incorporating a capital plan for the Parks Commission to use in conjunction with the town's capital plan. So I'm certainly not suggesting that that be done outside of a capital plan. But what I'm asking is if the Parks Commission is planning on doing that, because there's a lot of maintenance, and I've heard at workshops, and I've heard from citizens, as well as having gone to these parks with my grandchildren, there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done, and I don't see a capital plan. So I'm asking if it's the intention of the Parks Commission to develop a long-range capital plan.
Can I respond?
Sure.
I have spoken with the DPW director about developing a capital plan for not only our town facilities, but all our parks as well. So it is a discussion we've had.
Okay.
I would like to see, and I think it's appropriate that it be in the capital plan, all our town buildings and our assets that we need to maintain.
I agree.
As far as annual maintenance, that's something that we're going to have to discuss during the budget cycle.
Okay, so my recommendation is that you work with the DPW director. Obviously, the Parks Commission's a key component in that, because you guys are just starting to get a handle on the fees, on the scheduling issues, but obviously, maintenance is a huge component of that. And so what I'd like to see is just movement on that maintenance component, and improvements, not just maintenance, but improvements. And we're seeing this grassroots initiative to do some of those improvements, and I'd like to see, from a town's perspective, see more of that incorporated into the capital plan.
I just have one more thing for the park. What is your position on Article 5?
I'm going to let Dennis handle that one. This is the Wallace Park Playground.
Yeah, they came early on to our park meeting, discussed a number of issues, worked with Jack's department to clean up the area. At this time, we were in favor of the overall project, but right now we can't really support the actual plan itself. We've never seen an actual plan come before the board to vote on yet. We're the concept of it, we're all for it, and we're ready. As Jack had mentioned earlier in the discussion, the devil's in the details, and a lot of the stuff nowadays is different regulations with playgrounds and different stuff, so we want to make sure it's done correctly and done right. And at that point, we'd be in favor of supporting it, but to this point, we haven't seen a plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, and I do invite you to stay around if you can, but we're going to get another component and move to number 2, which was a status update on the memorandum of understanding between the school committee and the Parks Commission for the artificial turf field. And I guess from our point of view, the selectmen have always been curious about how any of that relates to the annual maintenance costs of the artificial turf, the track, and payments beyond just the bond. You know, is there going to be any money in that fund when it comes time to redo it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big questions that I have, and I think we should probably hear your presentation then. Hopefully a lot of the questions that we have will get answered during the discussion.
So who's up on that one?
Where do you want to start?
How are we paying for it?
Well, no, I want to start with who's controls the artificial turf. I want to start with that. Is it the school or is it the parks?
Well, I think that's part of the memorandum of agreement, because up to this point, there really was no formal agreement going all the way back to when we started construction on that in 1999. It was a long process, took about almost 10 years to get to the point where it was near completion. And we sort of operated, well, from my perspective, without much instruction and without really being clear on who was responsible for what. So for the most part, the school took that responsibility and maintained the facility and did the majority repairs. I frequently went to Jack when we had problems and things that we couldn't resolve. Fortunately, there weren't many along the way. And for a facility, the artificial turf and track, which were initially given about an 8-year lifespan, we got 12 years out of both of them. And because of the condition of both of them, it was relatively inexpensive for the resurfacing of the track and the replacement of the turf, which we completed last year. Since that time, we've worked to try to get the memorandum of agreement. I think the biggest stumbling block was finding what the original agreement was, which we were going back quite a distance to try to find out what agreement was in existence. And in fact, there was, I don't think any of us had a good idea what really was in agreement, because the two sides never reached an agreement on that. Currently, we are close, I would think, to reaching an agreement, ready to present within a meeting or two an agreement to the school committee to consider.
So is that the draft that we have dated December 7th, 2010? Is that? No. So what is that, the December 7th, 2010?
Something that was sent over from Superintendent Combs that I believe they had put together. Am I correct in that?
Can she join you?
Yes.
So that informational packet that we put together shows the history of trying to work together to form that agreement. It dates back to 2002, when the school committee voted to designate that as recreation for purposes of obtaining a grant. Around that same period of time, the Track and Field Association had asked the Parks Commission if they would schedule and maintain that property. There was never a formalization of how that all was going to work. In 2009, that confusion prompted us to say, let's get something in place, and we drafted that. That was rejected by the Parks Department, I believe, in 2011 is when we got closure on that. And so after reviewing this whole history, and everything's sat there until we needed to replace the artificial turf, and then we put together, with everybody sitting around this table, actually supporting this plan, and the youth organizations as well, the Bengals as well as LISA, saying we're interested in making sure that this can continue, and the bond was passed, and there's a plan to pay for that at that point in time. That's not, we've articulated that in a memorandum to the Board of Selectmen. The Bengals have memorialized that in a letter as well. So the payment of, I believe that amounts to $47,500. That portion is memorialized in letters between the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, as well as the Bengals and the Board of Selectmen. And then there's the proposal for the rest of the funding comes from a cell tower that I think is in process. Mr. Lunda told me they've done borings at this point in time, I believe. And I know Jack's been involved with that as well as through the planning board. So what was put together, that was to pay for against the bond is all.
So there is not a memorandum of understanding right now?
There is, between the parks and the schools?
Yes.
No, there is not.
No, there is not. So everything that we're seeing are all drafts that haven't been accepted?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't know who wants to give an overview of the...
Overview of...
Well, the scheduling. I mean, one question that I had is the scheduling. If I see the memorandum, is that the Parks Commission or is that the school or is that...
So we sort of wiped out that whole, we're in the midst of having a new a memorandum that the three of us worked on at our meeting last Thursday.
Okay.
And we're hoping that it's something that there's going to be very little back and forth between the schools and us on.
Okay.
It's not, I don't even know how to describe it.
Well, and it's not officially voted on by this board, but I'll speak on me as an individual, as a park commissioner. I think the biggest, as we've gone through, not to reiterate all of it again, but as we've gone through the field permitting and stuff, in our opinion, it's the town, right? So whether it's school, us, whoever else, it's the town. So, as we're kind of coming full circle and we're looking at scheduling, we're looking at maintenance, we're looking at how do we coordinate with the high school, how do we coordinate with youth groups. Pete's done an excellent job kind of managing that aspect of it. So we're all looking at that saying, okay, we don't have any full-time people to do that. We really can't equate to the maintenance of the field. It's a lot of moving parts down there. We need somebody to do the maintenance on a daily basis. Having gone through all of that for a year and understanding a little bit more on the turf side, we've changed the memorandum quite a bit, and the biggest section that I'm interested in seeing approved would be that the town youth groups and town people itself still have representation down there to utilize that field track area, and that there's some sort of scheduling or some sort of, if there is an issue, they would come back to the Parks Board, and that we would discuss that issue with the school and kind of come to an understanding. And really, other than that, that's really my only thing that I'd like to see memorialized, that if a youth group does have an issue with something, whatever it may be, 5 years from now, that they have a little bit of a vehicle to come back to and say, come to our board and say, hey, I want this, this, and this, and then we would work with the school. Exactly. And other than that, I think we're prepared to make some decisions fairly soon.
If I may. It goes back to the issue of policy and governance around the property that is still owned and the responsibility of the school committee. And so part of the memorandum of agreement has always been an acknowledgement that school committee policies are there. And we also agree this is all about all the folks sharing in this wonderful resource that has been provided by the taxpayers. And we actually have longstanding policy that articulates how that is accomplished in terms of adult groups, in terms of youth groups, as well as school groups. So where other organizations or commissions are trying to create this basis of policy to operate from, the school committee has this long history of having that and refreshing that on a regular basis. So to respond to the concern about everybody having access and how that works, the school committee policy actually speaks to that as well.
So back to the question that Phyllis had, the cost is, how long is this newest makeover of the turf field or the new replacement of the turf field expected to last? Does anyone, I know we outlived our last.
Yep. Well, looking at the maintenance that wasn't done on the turf field over its first, the original turf field, and we've already done, we just ended the first year of use of the field, and we brought in the company, and they went through the field, they removed debris, they restored, put the pellets back in their proper location, they, for lack of a better term, fluffed up the fibers on the field, and it's important to keep that level of infill at a certain point to give the fibers the least amount of wear. That's what didn't happen in the first field and why we saw the field deteriorate over time. Only, as they will tell me every time they come here, there's only two things that really affect the field: sunlight and usage. So we can't really do much about the sunlight, so it's all about how much usage there is and how often you bring in the company and do the yearly maintenance on the field. So I've put into my budget for next year 2 annual services from the company to do that service on the field, to keep the pellets.
The school budget.
The athletic budget.
The athletic budget.
Yeah, as well as painting the lines on the field as well. So what wasn't done the first time around is being done in this next one. I would expect that field to last longer than the previous one. It's a better quality, it's a little different material, it's a different infill, and we do a good job on keeping it maintained and the usage.
What's the warranty?
The warranty is 8 years.
Okay.
And it's a 12-year bond, if that was...
Yeah, it looks like it will be paid in full in fiscal 30.
Yes, I believe it's a 12-year bond.
Yeah, it's, our notes indicate. And I actually had a question. I don't know who put together this spreadsheet, but I actually had a question of it. Karen did. Karen?
Could you use the microphone, Karen, please?
On the fiscal 30, it indicates that the existing bond will be paid in full.
Shows the payment.
And that shows a balance in the account of $134,430. And then with the payments between the anticipated revenue from the school department and the Bengals, it shows in fiscal 42 that account to have a balance of $704. So I guess so even after payment of the existing bond, we'll have a balance of $134 in that account in fiscal 30?
Correct. Because as on the left-hand side of that spreadsheet is the money that we'll be receiving for the cell tower. That revenue escalates 3% a year, so as that money goes up, the draw on the artificial turf fund goes down.
Okay. So I guess my question would then be, Mr. McAuliffe just said that it's incorporated in the budget for his maintenance. I guess, should that part of that maintenance be covered by this fund? Is that appropriate? So that's question one. And then question two would be, at the time we need to replace it, will the funding within this be adequate to replace it when it needs to be replaced? So the answer is no, and Karen's shaking her head.
No, our plan was to generate fees and pay off the bond, and then have fees in there to generate the next bond, so that we could potentially put down a considerable amount of money to kickstart the next phase, which would be another 10, 12 years.
Okay,
in addition
fees to what types of organizations?
So right now, you've got a couple of youth groups that are paying fees, the Bengals and LISA.
Okay.
There's also the schools incorporating some stuff in there as well. And then you also have kind of one-off, there's a lacrosse group that will rent it now and again, and there's other fees I think that'll come about. But again, we've got to manage that facility not to overuse it, even though it is a turf field. You do want to kind of be cautious of who's using it for how long.
So I didn't think LISA was using that field for soccer. I thought they used the grass fields. Are they using that field for soccer?
No, LISA's agreement is with the school on the 3 grass fields at the school site.
Right, because my granddaughter's in soccer, and I have...
And that was the other issue, too, is why we're basically coming up with a memorandum to understand who's doing it, is as we're generating generating fields and field permitting on our side, how do we go to somebody like Lysa or Bengals, even if they're going to use another field, use the turf field, but Mr. McAuliffe has to jimmy rig something because it's a rainy day and he's got to shift around, and so-and-so was supposed to rent it through the Parks Department, was the turf, but then because there's a high school game, it needs to be switched, and now you're not on the turf, you're on the grass field, but we don't own the grass field, so it just kind of became
The scheduling is the
a little bit
biggest
easier.
issue, and when the weather turns wet, the issue becomes even difficult. That balance of using the fields and protecting the fields become an issue. So it was problematic with working under this idea that the turf field was controlled by the park department and the grass fields were controlled by the school. When it came time to schedule things, I could juggle the high school teams around fairly easily, but it was more difficult juggling Lysa around the Bengals, and, with this idea that one field is out of play. And so by having all 4 fields under one scheduling, then I can put the best use of the fields and limit use of the fields wherever possible to maintain all of them. As, like I said, it's really the town fields. So the idea that one is out of play, and that just maintaining this year, we have this fall, the high school has 9 teams plus the band looking for field space on any given day. And then Lysa has a number of teams that change every year, and their numbers have gone up. And the Bengals have teams playing as well, and practices every night of the week. The only day that really we schedule nothing is on Sunday. So that's kind of left open Sundays for, just pick-up games, anybody who shows up there for the most part.
Well, that's cool.
But, when we looked at, I remember sitting here going over the school building project and showing, what the fields look like, and, in the middle of September and October, they were all red because there's not enough space. I've had to juggle and cancel practices for all of the high school teams, the band, and the Bengals and Lysa, and just on a rotating basis. So it wasn't, the school didn't win every time, and no one got left out every time. I rotated it through each group when we didn't have fields to provide. And I think for the first year of going through that, everybody was really good about it.
My only concern with the turf field specifically is we know that it's a huge ticket item, and having a plan to address it when we need to is obviously my concern, is to go back and say, well, we need another bond. I'm not sure if that's going to fly. So is there any other options? I guess that's the question.
I think the cell tower was a good portion of the revenue generated. I think to charge any group $200 an hour for that field, you'd price it out. We did a kind of cost comparison to other towns, and there's just not enough fees I think you can generate, or enough time in the day, even with the lights, to generate enough fees to support it 100% without trying to space it out.
Renting it out shortens the lifespan. And, to charge, as it is now, we charge our students who play sports $250 to play. If I up that price to pay off the field early, then I'm asking the kids who are playing now to pay for the field for kids who are playing later on. So when I brought that plan to the town and to figure out how to pay for that field and track replacement, the idea was it would last for 12 years and we would pay it off over 12 years based on the fees we were charging the students while they were using it, and that included the youth groups, so that in effect they're paying for the field while they use it, and at the end of that time, the next group, a couple years before that's due, we'll have to start thinking about that, and for the most part, the fees would just continue on to the next group.
But when you say that, the cell tower revenue would go to the town if it didn't go to that. The $40,000 from the school comes from the town, so that's $70,000 that the town's kicking in every year. The kids aren't paying that. I think that's an inaccurate way to receive it.
That 40,000 from the school, a good chunk of that 40,000 is coming from those fees that we charge the students, at $250 for every sport they play. So regardless of where the money comes from, it's town money, it's whatever, but it's a facility that gets a huge benefit to the town and to the students in the town.
Now, I had a question. Do the turf fees go in a separate bucket than the grass field fees?
Yes, well, I mean, once we establish the fund, if the fund gets established at town meeting, any of the rental fees related to the artificial turf field would go into that fund.
Just the artificial turf fund?
Correct.
And then the other fields, fees kind of go into maintenance of those fields?
The other fields fees are school revenue.
Facilities use.
So there's just a big facilities use bucket?
But the other town, the other fields, yeah,
The grass fields under.
the grass fields under the parks, yeah.
Like the baseball fields, that
Well, I
goes
guess
into
I'm-
the revolving account. What I can tell you is if we will be having a discussion with the schools, if this warrant article, I believe it's, I don't remember what warrant article number it is anymore, the one establishing a fund where all the rental fees would go into, if that does not pass, we will have to have a serious discussion with the school on how to make sure that the money received from rentals, whether it be from Bengals or whether it be from a private group that wants to come in and use it, that those all go back into the turf, that they're not used for.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a point of order?
Yeah.
This part of this evening's meeting is supposed to be a joint meeting between the Select Board, Parks, and the School Committee. The School Committee has been kept out of this conversation, and I feel they should be brought into it. Thank you.
School committee is welcome to join the conversation. I don't believe they've been kept out of anything.
We're giving about 10 more minutes, and then we were asked to come at 7:20.
Okay,
Okay?
that's fine.
If anybody wants to speak, I mean, anyone can speak. I mean, you need to come up to a microphone.
We're not on our topic. We are on the turf field.
I would just like to say something. As I sit here for the last hour and a half, I would just like to acknowledge the hard work of the Park and Rec Commission and the school committee for their efforts to come together for this conversation. I would also like to recognize the Board of Selectmen in that we organized ourselves to be able to come together to have this meeting tonight, this joint meeting. It was my assumption that the meeting was about a status update of the MOA, not an in-depth overview of what the agreement was between the Park and Recs Commission and the school committee. We have not seen any new MOA. We have not had a chance to look at it. And so other than a status update as listed on the agenda, it was not our understanding that this was going to be an extended conversation about the turf field and the Park and Rec Commission. Additionally, our goal was to come here and have a conversation about our number 3 on the agenda item. And it is very difficult for us to, as you can imagine, with all of the meetings we all have to attend, commit this time when we've been sitting here and we're not getting to that agenda item. I'm just expressing my frustration because I think that we were all committed to coming here this evening and accomplishing that task as a discussion item, which it is listed on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate the work that the Park Commission and the school committee has done as well. I've made it very clear in every time we've talked about this that I wanted to have an in-depth discussion, certainly not just a status update. So I apologize that I've asked these questions, but they're questions that I have asked routinely in all of the selectmen meetings that we've had. So I apologize if the agenda did not reflect my comments. But it certainly is questions that I've asked consistently to understand the mechanisms of the artificial field. But I do appreciate your.
Why don't you join us?
Yeah, and I do appreciate.
I don't need to join.
I do appreciate your frustration that it said 7:20 and it's 5 of 9. So very valid point.
Well, maybe next time you just have separate.
Could you use a microphone, please? And I invite you to join us. We have microphones at the
We just
table.
think that perhaps your agenda items are just too long to have a workshop with each separate group.
Agreed.
Maybe you should have had a parks workshop and a school committee workshop separately, so that items could be discussed in depth separately.
I don't
Because It
disagree.
is the week before Thanksgiving, honestly.
As it is for us as
The
well.
week of Thanksgiving, and I could be baking pies at this moment, and I'm quite frustrated that I'm not.
We do have another item. I believe that all three of these topics involved all three of the people that we've been talking about, and I didn't have them earmarked as one for parks, one for school. I believe the last topic was very much part of the school committee, and you're welcome to be part of it.
As is the turf field.
That's what I mean. Now, the next one is also important, and if you don't believe you have enough time, we can postpone that and do it at a future time. But I think it's very critical for us to talk about.
We haven't had, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that you understand that the school committee has not even set eyes on a memorandum of understanding that Ms. Menard has talked about that was created on Thursday. So there's no way that we can possibly come to a conclusion without having done our due diligence and read through the documentation. And I just wasn't sure that you were aware of that. So this conversation is perfectly fine if you deem that necessary, but as a school committee, it would be misrepresentative of us to respond to MOA without actually having the time to have read it.
And we didn't ask for a response on the MOA.
I'm just saying, like, the goal, listening to what has been said, the goal was for us to complete an agreement.
No.
That was.
And please.
Earlier you mentioned, let's get this finished up. I thought we could finish this.
I think early on, we said there is no MOU.
Yes.
And what we've been talking about, and perhaps in more detail than we could have, is what are the issues so that when the people that are tasked to put an MOU together need to do it, they have the input from the other two groups that care.
And the fact that there's an article on the town meeting warrant, which is next week, relative to the artificial field. So understanding the issues and the finances associated with the artificial field is crucial to the discussion at town meeting and certainly our vote on that article at town meeting. So it's relevant, and I apologize. I wish I could be baking pies as well. But the reality is that Monday is town meeting. So we have to have these discussions.
Tuesday.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I just did it. Tuesday is town meeting. So talking about this article is important.
I agree with you. I just wanted to make sure you were aware that we have not read the most current agreement.
Nor have we.
Nor have we.
So-
haven't approved anything to, like, we haven't, the three of us need to vote on even giving you the draft that we've created, which we haven't.
And the second sentence of number 2 talks about discussing the annual maintenance costs of the artificial track and field, scheduling the use of the field, paying the bond, replacement of the field at the end of its life.
So all of that's on the agenda. They're all on the agenda. All of the discussions that we're having.
Invited at 7:20 then.
Okay.
Is what I would just like to say.
But I think this discussion is relative to the school committee, which is why we thought that having a workshop with all of us, the turf field is certainly relative to the school committee. It's important to you guys, I would think, and we wanted to talk about all of these issues that are articulated on the agenda.
We were planning to talk about relocating the school district central offices, the strategic plan for Turkey Hill, and the co-location of TC Passios after renovations. If you'd like to join that discussion, we could have it now. If you'd prefer to postpone that to a future date, we can do that.
We would prefer to postpone it to a future date.
That's fine. I just want to read what our agenda actually says. Status update on the MOA between the School Committee and Parks Commission for the artificial turf field, discussion on the annual maintenance costs of the artificial turf and track, scheduling of use of the field, payment of the bond, and replacement of the field at end of life. That's what we're talking about.
Agreed. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll go here. I absolutely agree that that is what is on the agenda, and I can see that in front of me. I would like to note for the record that number Number one, the report of Parks and Commission and the DPW director on the state of the town parks, fields, beach, including long-term maintenance, was an extensive report that I don't think that we anticipated being longer and getting us to about 8:20, which is what it did, an hour past our anticipated time of coming into this conversation. I would have felt comfortable being part of a conversation, but I think that when we reached that mark, it was clear that we were sort of extending ourselves a little past what was doable for all of these folks on a Tuesday night, so.
Okay, I understand. It is a workshop. We didn't have appointments assigned by times. We were trying to work through our workshop. The selectmen still have an executive session to do before we go home and bake any pies. At the request of the school committee, I would suggest that we hold off on the discussion, although it's an important discussion, on the future of Turkey Hill and the co-location of school and town offices in the TC Passios. Is there any discussion of next steps other than to continue this workshop?
Well, unfortunately, I think number 3 is critical to town meeting and the article that's on the town meeting warrant on Tuesday. So I think we perhaps may even have to just look at the information that's been presented, and because it's going to be part of my decision-making process on Tuesday night, and it's certainly part of our discussion on long-term plans.
And Mr. Londa is here and was prepared to brief, basically the same briefing that was provided to the school committee and is available on YouTube. It was a recorded meeting a month ago. I'm sorry, I don't remember the precise date, but
16th of October.
16th of October.
You want to join us now, Ms. Fonda?
We'll do this. Yeah, we'll just do, we'll provide that briefing again. But this is the same briefing the school committee has already had, so.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming.
So Turkey Hill Elementary School, the PowerPoint we put together for that discussed the current status and future planning. So to go over that, I'll be quick, but I'll try to hit the high points. Constructed in 1968, 1969, we'll be hitting the 50-year mark next year. It's a 68,000 square foot building. Currently has the 3rd through the 5th grade in there. The major work was over multiple years, roof replacement, 1996 and 98, boiler plant renovation, which was the complete boiler plant in 2003. And then the solar that went up in 2010. I put that up there because it is significant, looking at the long term on the building. The major requirements, so this is a building, like I said, that'll be hitting the 50-year mark. That's significant. Once you get to 50 years, you know you're at the point where you have to kind of come to grips with what do you do with the building? Do you renovate or do you replace? You know, the buildings, like I said, it's 50 years old, and we've done some limited work there, but window systems are all single-pane windows. The building does not have the extensive window systems like we saw on the Palacios or on the high school, so energy loss is certainly a lot less than we saw on the high school when it hit the end of its life. Flooring, we have asbestos floor tile still in most of the classrooms and on the hallways on the 2nd floor. We've been doing some work over the last couple of years. We replaced flooring in the administrative areas, 1st floor hallways, and 4 classrooms over the last couple of years. The work that we've been doing also has been focused on getting access to shutoffs, because the plumbing system, for some reason, all the shutoffs that our gate valves were just failing, which showed we had to shut the building down. We were to be able to really do any work on plumbing systems. So getting access to above the ceilings, the work that was done this past summer, should help us with the ability to be able to do repairs going into the future. Interior finishes are are getting better because we've spent some money on flooring and ceilings over the last couple of years. The electrical system, it's inadequate. It doesn't do all of what we need, and it's getting at the end of its lifespan. We have had some issues with the major switches for the building needing to be rebuilt. Asbestos, the major concern on asbestos was spray-on fireproofing. We have been working on that over a couple of years. That continues to be a major element in the capital plan for the school department to be able to deal with that. One, to be able to get access above the ceilings, be able to replace some of those ceilings, but also to be able to get access to electrical and plumbing that are above the ceilings. ADA compliance, the building has got limitations, particularly with respect to restrooms. We have no fully compliant restrooms. We've taken restrooms that the building has and done the best we could to get them as close as we can, but they are not fully compliant. We also have some areas that we don't have access to with lifts, such as the girls' locker room, the stage, and the music room. The music room does have a ramp that was put in, but it is too steep for current code. Life safety, the building is not sprinklered. It does not have a hood suppression system for the kitchen, and the fire alarm system does not meet current codes and is extremely limited. It does have horns and does have strobes, but there are none in the restrooms, and we also we have very limited numbers of smoke detectors throughout the building. Air conditioning capability is very, very limited in the building. We currently air condition the principal's office and one classroom. And the windows in the building are hopper style. They don't really lend themselves to be able to receive window units, and we don't have electrical on the exterior. So that is something we've been fighting over a number of years, trying to be able to get some classrooms taken care of. But it's a struggle because, as I said, we really can't open the windows to put an air conditioner in, and there's no ductwork for ventilation. The school pretty much has unit ventilators, so that's kind of our limitations there. And I think that may be a significant issue looking at the long-term use of the building. Envelope issues, we know we have some envelope issues with the fascias on the first floor. We also have some lintels that are showing signs of moving around on the mini gym area and in the former shop area. And then finally, the HVAC. So we have, all of our equipment is operational. It is old. It operates on the old pneumatic controls, which we still can get parts for. And we have the boiler room running with digital controls. So we have kind of a hybrid system. It is operational. We do know how to work on it, and we're able to get parts. So we keep it going. And I don't really anticipate that being a problem, but it does limit, some things that we might want to do in the future in the building. Capital plan submission, you can see there, the asbestos abatement continues to be our highest priority in the district, and that continues over a number of years as we still want to take care of classrooms on the first floor as well as the second floor hallway and the stairway, the additional stairway that we didn't do this past summer. Beyond that, you see some ADA items. We have domestic hot water heater in 2022. The big ticket item, the one we want to draw your attention to, of course, has to do with the roof. So the roof, like I said, went on in 96 through 98. We're showing in FY23, $15,000 for engineering work and $1 million in FY24 for roofing. So roofing is one of the projects that the MSBA will partner with the town to take care of. So this is not something that the town would be on the hook for, but it is also one of those things that you look at, and it's a major component of figuring out what do you do. If you partner with the MSBA for a $1 million roofing project, you then essentially will not be able to do another project with them for another 10 years.
Oh. And how much would MSBA kick in?
So we should probably estimate around 50%. The percentage may be higher, but after you do all the all the various things that they do, about 50%.
Could you couple the roof project with other improvements that are on your radar for future years?
You know, I think what happened, I would say there are a few categories of things that the MSP will do that. They will do windows, roofs, and boilers. We don't really need the boilers, but they would do windows.
Okay.
So the real trick is to figure out, do you do the roof and push out for 10 years to look at either a replacement or a renovation 10 years from then? So you could be looking at, FY 34 for a renovation to the building if you went that route. Or you could, and so I'll move to the last page here. So the long-term plan. So obviously we have options. Those options are 3 of them listed here. One would be to do that roof replacement when the roof hits that 25-year mark, which would be somewhere between 2020, 2023. The solar array on the roof, we're in a 15-year power purchasing agreement. That power purchasing agreement includes removal of the solar arrays one time at the contractor's expense to allow us to do major roof work. Beyond FY 2025, if we did it then, we would then, at that point, own the solar array, and that would then be at our expense. It is a cost. I don't know that it's the driving factor at all on making that decision. It's just something to consider. Once again, the 10-year, if you did that, you have a 10-year moratorium with the MSBA before you get around to another potential project in the building. At that point, the school will be 66 years old, and all of your other systems will be, pretty shaky. Option 2 would be to look at a renovation of the school. That could happen as early as maybe as 2029, if you then couple the roof with that renovation. A renovation, because you don't have any ductwork in the school, they said you're using unit ventilators. It's not really likely, I think, that you would air condition the school. That might be something that would become a major factor in deciding whether or not you renovate or replace. Room for expansion on the building. The building was built to expand on the classrooming, to add additional classrooms. If you add another 30 feet on the building, you can add 4 more classrooms. You're somewhat limited because you do have the track and field facility at the end of the building, but you could potentially get additional 4 classrooms on that end, and maybe go down the other end and add another 4. So you could potentially get up to 8 additional classrooms if at that point we needed that much additional space. Then option 3 is a third one to consider would be a replacement. It's obviously going to be the more expensive option, and locations for new construction would have to be sorted out. Renovations can be very, very effective, and they are less costly. New construction gives you probably a better outcome over the immediate results, because you don't have to live with whatever you have in the building. But like I said, you would have to find a new location for the building. So where would you put that new building? Likely you would do very much what we did with the middle school, high school. You would take one of the athletic fields and put the school there, demolish the old building afterwards, and make that an athletic field. So that's, I think, is your option. Once again, I wouldn't see you doing it before 2029, and that is in keeping with the guidance from the school committee. The school committee about 2.5 years ago said, 3 years ago, directed me to look at how we make sure we get through another 10 to 15 years. And so, that's by having a very robust maintenance effort and being able to try to make sure that, we're doing the right things on a year-by-year basis to ensure that the facility stays fully operational and supports education.
But if I understand you correctly, following your capital plan, if we were to ask for help from MSBA to do the roof in 2024, for instance, that would affect that 2029 Renovation,
It
right,
would have to be
okay.
2034.
So you'd have to do something in 2024, maybe just say,
Well, if
you
you
know.
did something in 2024 with the MSBA, like I said, then you just push
no,
this forward.
but if you went with option 3, you wouldn't do anything on the roof, or you'd do maintenance, you wouldn't do
Yeah,
replacement
you
or
wouldn't
something
do
like that.
replacement.
Okay,
You would-
fair enough.
You would just pass on that and
Fair
you
enough.
just keep patching. you
Okay.
know, Which, so currently we don't have any leaks, which is
Yeah,
great, but,
okay.
but it does mean to stay on top of the roof.
Okay.
From a space perspective, John talked about adding classrooms. From your population projections, which I'm sure you did when we did the high school, do you see us needing to expand that school?
You know, what we're seeing with regard to early childhood education may move us in that direction at Turkey Hill Elementary School, simply because as we expand out preschool opportunities for students based upon need and demand, that may prompt some changes in terms of the configuration, again, in terms of the number of classrooms right there. Currently, we have room to expand. We have been adding classrooms. We're back in increased enrollment about every other grade right now. It has 6 teachers as opposed to 5 teachers, so we're back on the uptick, increasing enrollment across the board. Most significantly at the middle school, however, is where the largest number is. So you have some things in play there that could move you into an expansion at some point in time. That's coupled with what you do with your central offices and the options of, you know, do you put the school central office over at Turkey Hill Elementary School, or is there an option for it to remain as part of, at TCP, as part of the proposal to make that town hall?
How many classrooms would you lose if you made the district offices at Turkey Hill?
We can brief that.
Yeah, so-
They're color-coded, so they're easy to look at even. Let me take a couple for the audience.
Yes.
In Mr. Wander's description of what Turkey Hill is going to need over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, just want to remind everybody that the Green Communities Committee, or whatever their commission, will have money, has grant money available for improvements in energy efficiency in existing buildings. They cannot apply grants towards new construction, but existing construction and repairs that improve energy efficiency are within their purview. So window replacement, boiler systems, those types of things, there is grant money available. Thank you.
So I'm going to step into the discussion on options for relocating school district central office. So in 2014, we started looking at the possibility of, well, what are the many options for the patios? One of them we thought was potentially could have been demolition and the playing field. So we came up with the option of, well, what are we going to do if we are no longer able to be at the patios for central offices? We looked at the building stock we had. Turkey Hill seemed to fit our needs the best of what we had, knowing that it would go down to 3 grades, and we would move out and create some space there for that. So we looked at that. This was our best approach. We looked at classrooms that were near the main entryway, that were grouped together, that would be on the first floor and be able to support this. We picked up the classrooms you see in the red for the special services and the ACE program. ACE is the adult continuing education, and is
18 to 22-year-olds.
And so they need kind of a space where they could also do some life safety. So we thought that the old home ec room would be a good choice for them. We looked at the other 2 spaces, one of them being the 8th grade science room, which is one of the largest classrooms in that classroom wing, is a good location for both district record storage as well as the special education office, and then adjacent to that being a room, also a classroom that could be used for the special ed services such as, speech therapy or occupational therapy, behavioral therapy, but all keeping that grouped together. And then we looked at the district central office to go into the 2 classrooms in yellow. There's 2 rooms there. One of them is a classroom, and the other one was a teacher resource room. The teacher resource room is a smaller room. We thought that made sense as the superintendent's office for office with a small conference room. And then the other room would house the secretary for the superintendent, the data manager, and the human resources business manager. So we had that in there as well. We also looked at the old tech ed space as a potential place for the director of facilities as well as the maintenance team. So we started down the road to try to get us prepared to do that, should that eventuality come about. We had Monty Tech come and split that tech ed room and created a workshop for our maintenance guys so that we could move in there. We relocated our grounds barn, also that area on the footprint of the old portable classroom, and so that's all grouped together. The 4 rooms, or 4 of the rooms we did the asbestos removal, pulled the ceilings down, put new flooring in, prepped them for that, knowing that, if we bring them in there, we have to run additional phone lines, and all that's getting above the ceiling. So that was all done, and so we're prepared to do that if we needed to do that. And then when decision was made, okay, well, Palacio stays, we just kept everybody at the Palacios for now. But that was our plan for dealing with. What this really didn't deal with was our food service, which at the time we didn't have a food service director, but now that we would have to find a home for that, and that would be at one of the schools, maybe not at this school, but it would be one of the schools. And then IT was the other piece, and right now they're at the Palacios. We would probably look to put them at either the second person at the middle school, high school, or somebody at the primary school, but splitting them up.
But if we keep the Palacios as municipal, would they stay?
So when Taipei did the study and looked at the Palacios, they identified spaces for the school department. I would say that they didn't identify all of what we think we need, but there were spaces identified for them in the Palacios.
But that could be done in the study that we're working on.
We're looking at reworking that, so I guess that's one of my questions, is making sure that when we relook at it, that we include everything that you guys.
That would be the preference, actually, because while Turkey Hill can work, there are some real challenges. Your 18 to 20-year-old program over there, the restrooms present a really large challenge, plus the central offices being there, because if you look at the floor plan, there's one set of restrooms for small students there, little people, and 2 restrooms, 1 male and 1 female. So that's the restrooms that are in that proximity that the ACE program as well as the central office personnel would be utilizing. Not impossible to work through, but a challenge and something you want to be very attentive to. The preference is to be part of Town Hall. For the other reason is to continue to look for synergies between school operations and town operations, so we can share personnel and resources as much as possible.
So just to understand in summary, if you were to have to put all that in the Turkey Hill, how many rooms that are currently used as classrooms would have to be taken up for that?
It would be the 5. Well, it's 4 classrooms, and then is an office space.
So essentially, one of those possible future additions would need to be either saved or, not having to put on if we didn't occupy those 4 or 5 rooms.
Yes, potentially, yep.
So you guys know what your space needs are that weren't included in the TAPE study, and if we do get the funding for the study, we make sure we incorporate that.
We would be able to fully inform that. Yes.
One other thing, when you talked about the option 3, the total renovation and the use of athletic fields like we did this last time, let me just confirm something. When the school committee voted to transfer the Passios property to the town, I believe the statement was made that even if the Turkey Hill was going to be renovated, it would not include, it would not require us to rethink the property that is now the Passios. Is that a true statement?
I'm not,
Maybe I didn't say that as clearly as I wanted to.
You mean replaced, not renovated? If we were going to demo Turkey Hill...
If you were going to demo Turkey Hill and build a new school in its replacement with MSBA's help, option 3 with the town's support, would it require, or would you be sorry the school board turned over Passios to the town?
As John said.
Oh, that's a loaded question.
No, because the way I heard it was no, that was not part of the future plans, and I'm just trying to confirm that.
Because, like you said, you have, and this is again what TAP A said, in most communities, you build the school on existing fields and you put the fields where the school was. That's the typical thing to do.
So you use the school while you're building, you just lose a field.
There were a variety of options there. That was one of the options. Those options weren't prioritized, and as Mr. Londa just briefed, there were other options in terms of where to put the school. And the school committee at that time also felt that there was that they had made a commitment to the town with the building of the middle high school around the Passios building, that we weren't going to have yet another large building sitting there unoccupied or partially occupied, and that we were going to work with the town in terms of deciding what was going to happen with that. That was the commitment from the school committee.
And I agree
as I recall it.
That's the commitment. But what I'm hearing is that if we can incorporate, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we can incorporate the central office as well as the technology and the needs of the school into a municipal building, that would help alleviate some of the issues that at Turkey Hill and some of the other schools.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. Okay.
And do that with regard to the Brooks House property and that whole site there, with preserving as much green space as possible. That was also the discussion in terms of having the footprint be on that property so that as much of the green space is maintained, just to keep the opportunities for the future open.
Now, you mentioned the Brooks House. What offices are at the Brooks House that you would like incorporated into a municipal facility?
Well, the Director of Facilities office is still there.
Was that included in the TAP-A study? Was that in part in the floor plan that TAP-A did? Was that included?
I don't believe it was. I think that at that point in time, the Director of Facilities was going to be closer to where the barn and the garage are, which is over at Turkey Hill Elementary School. Correct, Mr. Londa? Did I?
Yeah, there were a number of elements that were not in the TAP-A study.
Yeah.
Special ed was...
Special ed?
Special ed offices were not, the ACE was not, school
and technology, you mentioned technology.
And I don't want to forget our early childhood program that operates out of the Thomas C. Passios, and that's a program that preschool, the family, and it's the community education partnership.
Yeah. Okay.
I always refer to it as School Link Services or Patty's program, but that program is another really important program that it's important for us to have a plan for. We haven't found a space at Turkey Hill, and
where are they now?
they're at TCP. They've been at Passios since they came over from the teen center.
Is there any way, and I know this is a really, it's really short notice, but I'm wondering if you have anywhere a list of the offices that weren't included in the TAP-A study that you would like, if you had every wish fulfilled, what offices would be in a municipal facility and the approximate space needs?
Mr. Londa and I could put that together.
I think that we've done that about a year ago or so.
That would be phenomenal.
Well, I think that's what we're asking,
But
that group to do.
I agree that's what we're asking the group to do, but I think when we talk about what we need from a town perspective, and we're certainly going to have some of that discussion at town meeting on Tuesday, is I think having an idea of the square footage needs of the community is important to that discussion. And if there's all of these things that weren't included, I'd like to at least have an idea.
We will put that together, and the school committee tomorrow morning will be posting a meeting to have directly before town meeting, so we will bring that to you, having had the school committee able to look at it as well.
I really appreciate that.
I just want to take a quick second to thank John for the good job that he does taking care of Turkey Hill Middle School and what the past year's building as well, while it was under his control. Because an important thing to me as an architect and a LEED accredited professional that maybe a lot of people don't understand is the greenest building, the best building for the environment is an existing building. And one of the things that disappoints me about MSBA is they use the CHIPS green certification as opposed to USGBC or LEED. And I feel personally one of the main reasons they do that is because CHIPS doesn't put such a huge emphasis on reuse of existing facilities and reuse of existing products that LEED does. So that's often forgot about in school building projects across the state because there's no emphasis on reuse of existing space, again, based on legislature. But it's proven that replacing an existing building and the demolition and all the embodied energy that goes into the manufacture of new materials will never be offset by the energy savings of a new facility. So to keep in mind, the best thing for the environment and the planet is to reuse an existing building in an effective manner.
That's really good to know.
That is really good to know.
Great. We tried to pack an awful lot into this workshop tonight, and I don't believe we're going to come up with any next steps other than we need to keep talking about this and reschedule work. But as a result of the several articles on the upcoming special town meeting, as a result of the work that we need to keep, moving forward, it was important for us to try to at least address a lot of the things we addressed tonight. But I think we're willing to keep the commitment to keep this as a high priority and to keep working it.
Absolutely. And I think that we did come up with some next steps.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that all of these offices that the school could use in a municipal building weren't included, so that was really good for us to know, and making sure that we do include them if we do get the funding necessary for the study at town meeting, making sure we include that and making sure we have this dialogue, I think is important. And hearing from the Parks Commission and the work that you guys have been doing is phenomenal. And I think knowing that we're working towards a capital plan for all of these improvements and understanding the operation of the turf field and how it all works, I think was a really, really worthwhile discussion. And I appreciate all of you coming and taking the time out of Thanksgiving week.
If I can
And all
just
the work
add,
you're putting into organizing that. Yikes.
Please.
there was a discussion about what was included in the TAPE for the central offices. At that time, it was 655 square feet, but when we updated the space needs assessment recently, I worked with Superintendent Combs on those figures, and it was closer to 3,600 square feet. And the board has that information, and that includes all those offices that were...
Does include all of those offices?
Special services, HR business manager, database manager, food service, IT is in another section.
Schooling services is in there.
ACE
ACE is in there.
Yeah. So we have it already.
Yep.
So we have all of, you think everything that we need is covered?
We'll review and once again confirm that.
Great, thank you so much.
If I can just add one other thing, I told Selectman Ebersol I would give comments. that in regards to the parks discussion, he would like to not to see it go to 100% user fee system for parks and recreation. The town should support it with a combination of tax revenues, user fees, and grants and other funds, just as we support other services such as our senior center. But user fees and taxes, we should do a similar system for parks. That being said, we need to get the parks and recreation capital needs into the capital plan so as to plan for their needs, and we tend to only focus on buildings and vehicles.
Great.
Wholeheartedly.
Agreed as well.
That was from Selectman Eversole?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any comment from anybody who participated in our workshop before I open it up to the public?
Including you guys.
Anybody? Okay, is there any public comment from the public in general? Any public comment from the board?
Just thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you very
Joining us
much.
tonight.
Thank you very much.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. I would like to entertain a motion to enter executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, under Reason 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's bargaining position, and the chair declares so. This is for the professional firefighters, Local 4358A, contract negotiations, not to return to public session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. McQuaid.
Aye.
Mrs. Luck.
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram.
Aye.
And I for myself.